Lovely to see you, people of St. Mary's in London. I've been setting this up for half an hour now, so I hope you can see me well, hear me well. I'm just recording on my iPhone, which I've done before, but still feels a bit weird. I'd so much rather be with you. I have been with you a few times, and I have so fun memories of those times. So I'm just envisioning seeing you all being in your lovely, beautiful church building as I speak to you today on singleness. Now, singleness I've been speaking to you a few times about. For some of you, you will know me, you will know my views on dating, views on singleness. For others, I'll be completely new to you, so let me introduce myself. My name is Aukelien van Abbema, which is a very, very difficult Dutch name. Just imagine wow, Aukelien van Abbema. You can forget the rest. I am a psychologist. I'm a trained psychologist working clinically for over 15 years now, and I am also a trained couples counsellor working with a method called emotionally focused therapy, which is a method created by Sue Johnson, who has written several brilliant books, one of them being Hold Me Tight. Your Jenny Peters will know all about it if you want to know more. But that method she is also applying now to single people, and with great results. So that's what I've been working on for the past few years, training myself in working with individuals using the Hold Me Tight principles. So I will speak to you today about singleness. You will have me looking at my computer screen, which you cannot see. It's a PowerPoint. You can email me to ask it. But it's just my notes on there. So if you see me looking at the screen, that's where I'm looking at. So where are we at? I've introduced myself. I don't know all of you. I have been praying for you. I've been praying for God to speak to you specifically. And I know He knows things I can't possibly know. So, but in preparing for this talk, I did sense some things that I want to address. And so it could be God speaking to you, it could be just me speaking to you. Take it as you will. And if something touches a nerve, I mean, this can be a very sensitive subject. Please find someone after this service to talk to and to pray with. So I normally ask you how many of you are single, and I'd see some hands and I'd see some people going, I'd rather not tell, or I'm not quite sure because I'm dating to someone who may or may not be someone I'd want to date again. So how many of you are single, and how many of the single people amongst you would rather be in a relationship? This is a question I always ask because there's a difference. There's singleness in church is sometimes addressed as this one sort of mono thing, like there's singles in church and this is one group. But in reality, of course, singles are as diverse as married people are. There's some people who have been single all their life, people who have recently been single for the first time because they divorced or they lost their spouse. There's all types of singles, singles with children, singles without children, and there's singles who'd rather be in a relationship, and singles who say, well, you know, actually, I love my life as it is. I love being single. I'd rather it stays this way. So when I address singleness in church, I always want to make sure that I address these various groups to the best of my knowledge and possibility. But I'm also very aware that in most churches, the longing for a relationship is less valued than people who are single saying, oh, I'm very happy being single. In a lot of churches, the message, if you say I'm single and I'd rather be in a relationship, is, oh, you just pray and wait and let it go. And you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Which is, well, as all of us who have been single for a longer time can testify, that's just simply not the whole story. So what we discussed today is actually the place in between being single and being in a relationship. What happens in between? So we can say a lot about marriage, and a lot is said about marriage in churches. We can say a lot about singleness, not so much is said about singleness, we can say a lot about that as well. But then there's also the space in between, going from A to B, going from being completely single, seeing no one, to dating, to being in a relationship, to getting engaged, to getting married, or if you never intend to get married, this sort of space in between, you kind of want to stay. Whether or not that's a good idea is another topic. But I want to talk about the space in between. So my story is, as I said, I'm a counsellor, counselling couples and individuals. Have been doing so for the past 15 years. And in 2008, I found myself single in church, 28, and not thriving as I thought I should be. And I was told to pray and wait, obviously, pray and wait. Trust in the Lord, for He will send you the right, perfect husband that He has chosen for you to your doorstep. Yes, I was part of an evangelical church, and not everyone thought like this, but there was quite a number of people who meant well by telling me I should just pray and wait. Oh, and in the meantime, let it go and be content in my singleness. So I felt very odd and incomplete when I couldn't let go of it, when I kept this real longing for a relationship, when it really hurts whenever one of my friends married, when it really hurts whenever one of my friends got a child. Because I also wanted children. And I didn't want children on my own, I wanted them with a husband, because as I saw around me, it was hard enough to have children together. So I thought, well, let's get that husband first. But there was no way of going from A to B. I just had to stay in A, be single and content and happy, and pray and wait and let it go. That was my sort of course of action, which is not an action at all. In many ways, of course, praying is an action, but waiting, what do you do while waiting? So I started reading on this topic, as I do. If I want to make sense of something, I read lots and lots and lots. You can't see it, but there's my bookshelves, and there's loads on there on dating, on marriage, on relationship, on singleness. But I quickly figured out that if I wanted to be married, I shouldn't be reading on singleness, I should be reading about relationships. And as I qualified to become a relationship counsellor, I did read a lot on relationships, which I actually could apply to dating. So that's what I did. And then there was this knowledge from the Bible, which I could apply to that. So I just developed a dating course in my church called Dare to Date. And that course is still available on YouTube, and I've turned it into a book, which you can also buy. But that's what I did, and it was a massive success. Turns out I was not the only one stuck in this place of praying and waiting and letting it go, and not the only one struggling with that. So what we did is we came up with a story also to tell our pastors, which they needed to hear from us, because most of them married young or weren't interested in marriage, to talk about this journey that was in between singleness and marriage. So that's where I come from. And then when you turn to the Bible, which is what we're doing today, there is this same tension between how God created us and where we are at now, and that's what I want to address today. So if we go to Genesis chapter 2 verse 7, what we read is, God formed man out of dirt, I'm reading from the Message here, from the ground, and blew into his nostrils the breath of life. The man came alive, a living soul. So what we read here is about, obviously, creation, God creating the earth, and all that's on it, and in it, and above it. And then the day comes that God says, I'm forming man out of the dirt from the ground. And it was a joyous occasion, that's how I read it. It's a happy, happy moment in time when God breathes life into man. And so that's what God does. This is Genesis 2. Now, what I always find fascinating, if you read through the entire chapter, there's this story God is creating. And so God tells about creating man, and then in verse 15 it says, God took the man and set him down in the Garden of Eden to work the ground and keep it in order. Which is tricky, because I always tend to think of work as something post-sin, sin enters the world and then we had to work. But actually work is a pre-sin thing. Work is a good thing. It's only after sin came into the world that work turns into hard work and something that can burn us out. But God took the man, set him down in the Garden of Eden to work the ground and keep it in order. So he was made to be a gardener. And then verse 18 comes. And God says, and this is tricky, right? This is fascinating, because up until now in creation, everything God created, he declared good. It was like, yeah, I did an amazing job there. This is it. This is good. Look at it, how beautiful it is, and how well done. So God created earth. He created it good. He created man. And then he says it's not good. It's not good, in verse 18, for the man to be alone. I'll make him a helper, companion. And then what does he do? He makes animals. And you I always, as a child, I remember reading this story thinking, come on, God, you can't possibly expect Adam to be happy with an elephant by his side, right? Maybe just me. But God makes animals, he presents them to Adam. Can you find someone you fancy? No, Adam says, not really. I don't see, there's not magic happening. I don't feel a connection, okay? He didn't find a suitable companion. So what does God do? God puts Adam in a deep sleep, takes one of his ribs and creates a woman. Again, when you think about it, really, guys, how amazing would it be if you just went to sleep tonight, God took a rib of you. Okay, that might hurt a bit, but then tomorrow morning, Monday morning, you wake up 7 a.m. and there she is, the woman of your dreams, by your side. I mean, come on, that would be perfect, wouldn't it? No search, no dating, no complicatedness, no Tinder, no awkward conversations, no, what will I do, no ghosting. She would just be there. Happy days. But that hasn't happened since. So since then, you do need to have to put on a bit of a search if you want a wife. Side note. Finally, Adam says, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, name her woman, for she was made from man. I always find this bit a bit tricky as well. I think he's very possessive here, but hey, she was his. I mean, she was his wife. We don't read her perspective. We don't hear her happy dance, but he was certainly happy. I expect her to be happy as well. But this is what happens. This is Genesis. This is what God says. In my creation, this is what I do. I give man a companion. That's what he says, basically. A suitable companion, someone who is made just for you. It's literally made just for you. This is what God does with Adam. So therefore a man leaves his father and mother, embraces his wife, they become one flesh. The two of them, the man and his wife, were naked, but they felt no shame. So this is another element, they felt no shame. And this is what I think one of the things we humans struggle with the most in these days is with shame, right? Shame kind of messes everything up. Shame is what makes us hide when we've been on a date and we weren't fully happy with how we presented ourselves. Shame is what makes us ghost people. Shame is what gets in the way really soon. But before sin, there was no shame. They were happy with each other. They were happy with just being the two of them. But it hasn't happened since. It hasn't happened since. Because quickly after, the story probably, it all goes downhill from there. Let's skip that part for now. Enough to be said about that, but that's not to me. One of the things we as a culture, and also in a church culture, we have taken from the story of Adam and Eve, is that love is about finding the perfect one. If you just pray and wait, it will happen. And until then, you have to let go and let God. Right? Except it's wrong. It's just not true. Love hasn't just happened since. And if it did initially, there is always have been. I ask anyone who married young, there has been a period in their marriage that was hard work. The hard work happened maybe later on, maybe not initially, but later on it really, really did. So that's a thing to remember. If people say, "Oh no, we were the one for each other," dig a little deeper. Did you really know straight away? Are you sure you knew that straight away? Because people tend to romanticize their story of how they got together. The further they are away from it, the more beautiful and less complicated it gets in their minds, which is a beautiful thing our brains can do. We can romanticize things. That's why people have more than one baby. Sorry, I've been there. This is why people try things again, even when they're hard, because they forget how hard it was. And so when people say, "Oh no, it just happened for us and we just knew they were the one," then take it with a grain of salt, if you say. Love doesn't just happen. It takes work, it takes effort, it takes connecting or reconnecting again and again. And that's okay, that's fine. We're wired to reconnect and to connect. So we can do that. You just have to trust yourself in that and accept and manage your expectations in the work it takes. So love doesn't just happen, and Hollywood is doing a grand job of telling us it does, right? I mean, I have an image here of Tom Cruise, you can't see it, but when he says to Renee Zellweger, I don't know what her character name is, "You complete me," and there's so many of those stories to be found in Hollywood. "You complete me." It's not true. It's a lie. You never complete me. God completes me. You can be a nice addition to my life. I like it who you are, but you're not. You don't have to complete me, because that would put such a burden on you. If you would find someone that you feel complete you in every way, as people sometimes put on Facebook, then what a burden that is to that person if they're not feeling well, or if you're in such trouble that you really have to fix things yourself, or if you had such damage done to your mental health in your youth for whatever reason, that you need a counselor to help you fix you and help God fix you. So we're not here to complete each other completely. So this is Genesis, it's describing things as they were initially created. But that's only at the very, 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 very beginning of this very thick book. And then we have the Old Testament, which is basically a series of broken relationships, broken families, broken friendships. It goes on and on and on. Very dysfunctional family stories in there. So if you feel like you come from a dysfunctional family, know that you're in very good company always. And then we go to the New Testament, and that is where things get very, very, very interesting. Jesus comes. Jesus was single, so this is what people often say to me, but Jesus was single. And I say, yeah, Jesus was also the Son of God. I'm not sure that Jesus' singleness should necessarily be an example for all of us in how we should be single and whether or not we should be single. Yes, Jesus was single, but he was having this very special mission, and he was also God. So, but then we go to Paul. 1 Corinthians 7. Now, this is the dreaded Bible verse by all single people, which I'll come to later. But let's start at the beginning. 1 Corinthians 7. Now, getting down to the questions you asked in your letter to me, Paul says. First, is it a good thing to have sexual relations? Certainly. But only within a certain context. Sometimes, this is where he starts with. It's okay to have sex if you're married. And within that context, it's a good thing. Now, there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, we tend to preach to singleness about how they should not have sex before they're married. We never tend to preach to married people about how they should have sex when they're married. That always haunts me. I'm like, why do we not talk about that part? But that's not the invitation I have today. So let's just park that there. We come to the dreaded verse 7. Sometimes I wish everyone were single like me. A simpler life in many ways. Now, this is what Paul says. Imagine Paul's a rabbi, so there's theories about him having been married, actually, because you could not become a rabbi until you were married. So the theory is that he actually was married but lost his wife somehow, and chose not to remarry, which is, I think, a different perspective. Having had the experience of marriage and then choosing not to have that experience again is a different choice than never have been married and finding yourself longing for a relationship. Dating is complicated. So this is what Paul says. Dating is very complicated. And if you marry someone, especially, he says, in this day and age, now imagine he's saying this to a Jewish community for whom marriage was the highest purpose in life. Maybe the only purpose in life. You have to get married and have children. Otherwise the Messiah cannot come. Paul says, wait a minute, Jesus has already been. The Messiah has already come. We've been there. We've passed that station. We are now in the next phase of kingdom living. And in the next phase of kingdom living, being married is not a necessity anymore. This is revolutionary. This is mind-blowing to people in that day and age. So it's completely different than saying this in the church now, it's better not to be married. Because it doesn't make much sense. Of course you can choose to not marry. Everyone can choose to not marry. I think it's far more revolutionary now to choose to marry, but that's yet another chapter. Celibacy is not for everyone, Paul continues, any more than marriage is. So this makes sense to me, a whole lot of sense. God gives the gift of the single life to some, the gift of the married life to others. So this is what he says. There is a gift of single life, there is a gift of married life. He doesn't say for how long and whether or not you can have two gifts in one life, because you could be apparently married for one period and single for another. But I think that's what he is saying. And then in verse 26, 27, because of the current pressures on us from all sides, I think it would probably be best to stay just as you are. Are you married? Stay married. Are you unmarried? Don't get married. But yet, this is another important addition he makes here. The current pressures, he's talking about severe persecution of Christians. And in that context, he says it's probably maybe just as well, maybe even better not to marry. Because if you marry, there's this other person to worry about. And if you have children, there's yet more people to worry about. And it was a very real option at the time that you could see your spouse and your children being murdered before your eyes because they were Christians. This is what Paul says. I'm going to spare you that pain. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. This is not our situation. So when people now in church say, oh, it's better not to marry because Paul says so, I say, well, actually, there's some connotations to make it now. Keep it simple, Paul says, in marriage, grief, joy, whatever. And then he continues, and I think this is where it gets really important for all of us. If a man has a woman friend to whom he is loyal but never intended to marry, having decided to serve God as single, and then changes his mind, deciding he should marry her, he should go ahead and marry. It's no sin. It's not even a step down from celibacy, as some say. So Paul says basically here, and again, this is revolutionary, I think. There is no difference between married people and single people in the kingdom of God. They're completely and utterly equal. This is not what we do in churches, and this pains me every time I hear examples of this. We put married people above single people. We say it's better to be married, but that's Old Testament thinking. It's not better to be married at all. If it's better to do anything, Paul says it's better to stay single. But if you want to marry, okay, go ahead and marry. But we're equal. And what does that mean? I think for your church, what does that mean for your church? And this is a conversation I think you need to have amongst each other. I can't tell you what it means for you as a church. But to lead together as singles and married people, to live together as singles and married people, to find connections with each other, regardless of your marital status, I think that is our great challenge and assignment as a church, to work together, because we're better together. And that's, I think, what Paul is basically saying. Above all things, let's do this church thing, let's do this life. Because it's complicated enough as it is. Let's do it together. And if we do marry and we do date, keep it as simple as we can. And this is just practically a good advice, I think. Keep dating simple. Don't overcomplicate things by endlessly WhatsApping or emailing with someone. If you could just hang out and have a coffee. And Corona has been tough. I mean, COVID-19 has been tough on all of us. Very tough. And I think we're still seeing the implications of that. But now that we get them, let's hang out together, let's be together, be a community again, and simplify life as much as we can by connecting and focusing on what's really important. So that's what Paul says. And then he says, in the end, he says, you know what, marriage is spiritually and morally right, and not inferior to singleness in any way. I love this quote. This is what Paul comes down to. So marriage is spiritually and morally a good thing to do. It's right. It's not inferior to singleness in any way. So he turns things upside down. Because the thinking was, oh, it's so much better to be married. Well, he says, you know what? It's actually better to be single, but it's not inferior to be married. So take that message with you today as you will. And if you have made getting married your idol, then that's something to discuss. But if you have made singleness into an idol, that's something to discuss as well. So I hope you have a very good Sunday. And I want to end in a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together in this weird and wonderful way of technology and of screens. Thank you for being with us. Will you bless the people in St. Mary's today as they go out into their week again? Will you be with them? Will you bless them with good conversations and good connection with each other and with you? Amen. Amen. And see you all next time. Bye.